All right, so good afternoon. Thank you for inviting me today.
No problem.
My name is Lieutenant Colonel Cedric Gray. I'm the Chief Information Officer, and also we go by another title, the DUIM, which stands for Director of Information Management. And I work for the Mississippi Army National Guard. I work directly for the Adjutant General, General Boyles, and my direct line supervisor is Colonel Tommy Tillman. In this position, I'm responsible for upgrading, maintenance, repair, and security principles of all 68 locations, armories that we have in the Mississippi National Guard within the state. So that's what I do on a day-to-day basis.
Awesome. That's a lot.
Yes.
So this series of our podcast is based on, as you know, digital transformation. So tell me how you feel the state, we're talking nationwide, and the state as well. How do you feel that companies and organizations can benefit more from digital transformation?
Well, I think one of the things that the states can do as far as digital transformation is concerned is it actually helps you with your security posture. And that's what we're looking for a lot of times when you're doing digital transformation. You want to make sure that if you're going to migrate from, a lot of organizations are going to cloud-based environments. Well, if you're going to go to a cloud-based environment, the biggest thing you want to understand is your data secure? Is it accessible? Is it reliable? And is it redundant? There's an old Security Plus principle. It's not mine. It's called the CIA triad. So confidentiality, integrity, and availability. That's the biggest thing. So once you accomplish those three aspects of transforming from I'd say a traditional old-fashioned file server environment, which a lot of people started off a long time ago. Now people want to be able to access their data if they're at home or if they're in the office or if they're at grandma's house visiting or they just need to jump onto the network, look at a quick file. They want to be able to do it from anywhere. So that's the biggest thing is the industry and civilian sectors. They got to keep up with the user's demand of how they access data and where they can access it from. From a management standpoint, we have to make sure that we're doing it in a secure, safe manner, and it's available, redundant, and it meets the integrity.
Awesome. Okay. So, and two things about that. So, with bCloud, we are AWS managed services. We provide IT consulting services. So many companies come to us because of exactly what he said: data security breaches, and they're unable to access their file. So they're headed to a meeting, and oh my gosh, I left this file, or I don't have my computer. With the cloud services, they're able to log on to anyone else's computer and access those documents. So that's what our CEO, James Phipps, and Reginald Spencer have been very hands-on with getting companies, especially in the state of Mississippi, moved over to AWS managed services. Okay. So being in the military, and this is going to be a very different question because you're the first military person that I got a chance to interview. How has digital transformation changed in your industry, and what has it caused you to increase technology competition, COVID demands? How does that affect you all in the military, or does it affect you all?
So actually it does. So of course, the one example, of course, probably everybody uses is COVID. And COVID drove us to rethink how we access data. One of the things that we knew that, we had the traditional, I call it virtual private networking, where you can take one of our government provided devices and remote back into our architecture in a secure manner. The problem was we weren't ready for the demand that came along with remote working and being away from the office. So when, in the past, pre-COVID, there would only be maybe 100, 150 concurrent users on our VPN technology platform. And then all of a sudden, we went to have to maintain about 1,000 to 1,500 users concurrently. So the demand drove up. So we had to actually increase our platform, but also come up with better solutions because not everybody that needed remote work had a device they could take home. So with that, I think one of the examples I can give you from a government standpoint, and it was all over the news, we ended up just reaching out to different cloud providers, Microsoft Teams, Skypes. We didn't use any one said provider because of course the government requires competition.
Right.
So we put our requirements out there and allow a lot of companies to come in and bring us commercial off-the-shelf products, COTS.
Okay.
We brought in Teams, we brought in Skype, we brought in a lot of collaborative type of environment that had the least amount of restrictions, but still gave us a positive security posture, so we can actually let our end users, especially those ones, because initially when COVID hit, everybody had you had these FDA requirements. If you're positive or anybody around you is positive, the whole section that was in close contact has to go home. So so we live with that whole concept, and sometimes based on close proximity of the personnel, you may lose the same personnel within one department. So we had to have a way for those personnel to share their data. So we started that initiative in collaborative environments, and then went forth even post-COVID and continued some of those type of cloud services. So we're still transitioning as well.
Okay, good. What advice? So a lot of companies come, like I said, they come to us, they want to know about cloud, they want to know about how to transfer. Many of them still have paper and pencil documents. So what advice can you give regular civilian companies, just digital transformation as a whole? The benefits.
Well, what I can tell you is one of the main benefits from an IT standpoint, being a chief information officer, I had to watch the budget. And so one of the main benefits is if I go to a cloud-based environment, I reduce my hardware footprint. Hardware footprint always has some underlying costs. Everybody loves those maintenance and support agreements. They seem to fluctuate in cost just based on which way the wind blows. So a lot of times for companies, my best advice to them at this point was, if you're going to go into a cloud environment, then look at the capital that you may be able to divest as far as hardware, physical servers, physical switches, that storage arrays that you may have. Some people have old storage arrays that are end of life, end of support. So they're going to be forced into that environment anyway. The question is, do they go back to the traditional storage, physical server, or do they go into a more cloud-based environment and let somebody else maintain all that infrastructure, and they just gain pointers and access and provide just what we consider a commercial internet access to that cloud-based services? Of course, ensuring that there's security on both ends to make sure that only their people are getting to their section of the cloud that they can access their data securely.
Oh, great. So, thank you for that. Workflow improvements from digital transformation, IT updates, and projects. You kind of hit on that. But any just specific workflow improvements that you think digital transformation could help with?
Absolutely. So I think being in the cloud allows, what we like is, from my standpoint, what we've seen just from going to more collaborative and cloud-based environments is data. Accessible to that data and being able to manipulate it real time, and then having those collaborative tools around it, even if it's just something as simple as secure video teleconferencing, chat sessions within that same collaborative environment. So if you have a team that's working on a project and all the files, I'm going to use the example of Microsoft Teams. All the files are in that Teams folder. They're talking to each other via chat. They're changing the files real time, putting in do outs and putting up an agenda to follow on, and keeping everybody that way. Nobody has to rely on their memory, and they're typing in there. If they record their sessions, they have a session they can go back and review at their leisure, just to refresh their memory, because as we get older, we forget things. So it's good to have, and so that is, I think, one of the biggest I can say improvements in workflow is just having that data available and be able to recall and regurgitate it as needed to produce high-end production. And then a lot of what I'm seeing from the I would say the employee standpoint, a lot of employers are looking for employees that want to do more remote telework, that type of environment, which that's what cloud mostly supports. So
right, and that's also with vCloud. That's another aspect of the company with seeing that and offering IT development and IT training. So we do have a portion of our company which train people who have minimum to no experience in IT, bring them through our program, and they get AWS certifications in IT all the way up to AWS architect. So they can do work remotely. They have an IT certification, coming from nothing. So that's portion of what we're doing for workforce development for the state of Mississippi as well. So I'm glad you touched on that. What other, if there is anything else, IT related advice can you give the general public?
So what I would say for the general public when it comes to IT device, I think we've gotten away from our basic principles of IT development. And I'll give you an example. One of the examples I talk about all the time is something as simple as privilege creep. In the IT industry, we call it privilege creep. Well, it's when one person is doing such a fantastic job, we hire them in this job. And then they spend 6 or 8 months doing this job and say, man, he or she they're awesome. And so we're going to promote them again. Well, who is doing the audit trail to look at their privileges and see if what their first job was, do they necessarily need those same accesses and privileges in the second job, and vice versa. And that's a simple concept that's been around for years. Privilege creep. Nobody looks at it. So all of a sudden, and the worst example I can give you is, and this was a real world example when I was working for a civilian company. You had a person that started at the base of at a entry level position in their accounting department. By the time she finished, she could assign the check, authorize the check, and print the check. That shouldn't be the case, because now you open up yourself for fraud, because you have one person that could take the entire payroll process from start to finish and actually issue a check. That should never happen. And so separation of duties is the key to preventing privilege creep. And the only way you can find out if you're actually having privilege creep, you have to audit. You have to audit employers, or the employers have to audit the employees' rights on the system. And until you do that, those are some of the simplest things that I can advise people to. Privilege creep, and the other thing is just auditing your account logs on your different. If you still have hard servers, and a lot of people, if they're using Microsoft-based systems, have users. Right. Well, you have stale user objects. That's a stale user object, and I'm gonna explain this just in case your audience doesn't know. A stale user object is just a user that hadn't logged onto your enclave for a certain amount of time. And what you need to do is find out, is he or she still employed? Did HR not pass on the paperwork so we can actually terminate the account? Or is that person just, on sick leave, medical leave? Do we need to put them in a different status? Because if that account is not being used, then that is a petri dish for a hacker to say, hey, this account's not used. Let me look. Let me see what I can do. Let's do some brute force password attack. See, can I find out what his or her password is and see what kind of privilege they have, and if I can move throughout that enclave just by gaining access to that account. So you want to audit your accounts, stale accounts as well. So
great advice. That made me think about some things in my own company. I may need to reevaluate. Thank you so much for that. And that leads us to, we've been getting an overflow of requests about the zero trust security. So if you are needing that, please reach out to Mr. Phipps at vCloud. We are providing zero trust security, which is now a federal mandate for all federal agencies. And thank you again. I really appreciate you coming.